Welcome to the Thoughtful Leader podcast. My name is Ben Brearley. I'm a leadership coach and the founder of Thoughtful Leader. The Thoughtful Leader podcast is all about short, sharp leadership advice because thoughtful leadership is good leadership. Welcome to episode 205 of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. In this episode, I'm going to be looking at 5 questions that confident leaders might find themselves asking. And the good news is, even if you don't feel that confident, you can ask these questions and perhaps people will think that you are more confident than you give yourself credit for. Okay, let's get into this episode right now. Now, it's tough being an insecure leader because it feels like everyone is out to get you. Confident leaders, on the other hand, have a far easier time of it. Confident leaders are far more likely to feel comfortable without needing to stamp their authority and make sure they're seen as the boss. But how do we get to that point of confident leadership? Well, it's not easy, but in this episode, I'm going to introduce 5 simple questions that confident leaders might ask their teams. And these are not necessarily difficult questions to come up with, but they can take courage, and insecure leaders are less likely to want to know the answers to these questions. It's worth noting that even the most famous company founders have stories of feeling out of their depth or fearful about what they were doing when they first started. And you can read about some examples in the show notes page. I'll put a link to an article from the Entrepreneur website, and you can access that at thoughtfulleader.com/205. So the cool, calm and collected manager in your workplace probably looks like they have all the answers, but the chances are this may even be a bit of an illusion. That's not to say that they aren't confident leaders. It's just that confident leadership doesn't mean there is a complete absence of fear or insecurity. It means that the people who are feeling fear and insecurity understand that they are just thoughts, not necessarily reality. And when these confident people feel fearful, they take action anyway. In other words, confidence isn't a requirement to take action, it's actually a result from taking action. And you can go back to episode 90 if you're interested on this topic, and the episode is Beating Leadership Imposter Syndrome, and I'll put that in the show notes page too. So the questions that I'm going to mention in a minute have a special quality about them. You don't need to have confidence to ask them. After all, they're just words and anyone can say words. You might need some confidence to be willing to hear the answer that comes back though. And when you ask these questions, you demonstrate that you can put your ego to one side. You demonstrate that you are committed to the team rather than just your own priorities. You also demonstrate that you are willing to learn from failure and that you don't need to be the smartest person in the room or be seen as the alpha leader, the leader of the pack. Now, asking these questions might even help you to build confidence. They will help you see whether you're on the right track and tell you what might need fixing. So try them out for yourself. Now, the first question confident leaders ask is, how could I do better? And this is a tough one to start with. You might ask this question to your boss or your team, and it's a tough question because you're inviting feedback about your own performance. While most people know this is a good thing to do, the reality is that it can be confronting. You might hear critical things about your behavior, your attitude, or even your haircut. Or you might hear nothing at all and wonder whether people are holding back what they really think. But sometimes you'll hear golden nuggets from people who have your best interests at heart. So when you ask this question, be sure to choose the right audience. Make sure you ask people you can trust to give you a valid opinion and whose opinion you respect. And also make sure you look like you want to hear the answer. Keep your body language open. Listen intently and ask questions to discover more information. This can show you're interested in receiving that feedback. And lastly, make sure you act on the feedback where appropriate. Try to take the feedback and use it to improve, otherwise people might not bother telling you for the next time. The second question you might want to ask your team is, what needs fixing? So on a similar theme to the first question, this one is about improvement, but this time it's not necessarily about you, it's about how the team works. Now once again, this can be daunting because leaders may see the team as a reflection of themselves, and if the team is perceived to be broken, they may feel as if it's their fault. Of course, not all team challenges are caused by leaders, but failing to address them is a common leadership misstep. So ask your team for their input about what's broken, and this can generate commitment and help them to feel valued. That is, as long as you are able to take the suggestions and actually implement some of them. Asking for input and then ignoring it with no explanation is not a trust builder. It actually has the opposite effect of eroding trust. And there is episode number 125 on how to build trust in your team as well. So I'd recommend you check that out if you're interested in that aspect of leadership too. That'll be on the show notes page, thoughtleader.com/205. Now, confident leaders also ask, what support do you need? Don't ask a question if you don't want to hear the answer, and this question is a good example of this. A leader might not ask this question if they feel stretched in terms of their workload, or if they don't feel equipped to provide the resources their people need. Sometimes a leader will also believe that no news is good news, so they'll wait for people to ask them for support instead. But unfortunately, there are many reasons why team members won't speak up, so it's better to ask them how you can help directly. Even if they don't need anything from you, it's certainly nice that you asked, and if they have requirements you can help with, you'll be removing barriers that would be stopping them from doing their best work. Another question that I think is a good one for leaders to ask is, what can we learn from this? And this is another excellent question for confident leaders to ask when faced with failure. The simple act of asking this question does a few powerful things. The first one is, it acknowledges the reality that failure sometimes happens and is a learning opportunity. It also acknowledges that steering away from laying blame is how you want your team to operate. And it also signals that you want to give rise to potential continuous improvement opportunities when you learn how to avoid repeating a mistake in the future. So it's important for leaders to create an environment where people are comfortable taking reasonable risks and trying new things. Now, this is often the way that people learn best, when they are stretching their comfort zone just a little. Now, the last question I'll mention here is, where do you want to go in your career? Now, on the surface, this question may not feel significant or daunting to ask a team member, but it's another one where some leaders might not want to hear the answer, because supporting a team member to fulfill their career aspirations may actually take them away from your team, and this can be scary if you rely on them as one of your top performers. But is it not a leader's role to develop their people, even if you develop them to the point that they strive for bigger and better things? Well, I certainly think so. So do your team a favor and ask your team members where they want to go. Then do your best to help them find development opportunities that will assist them in getting there. You might lose a team member or two, but you'll feel good knowing you played a pivotal part in their career development. So these certainly aren't the only questions that confident leaders might ask, but try asking them for yourself and see what answers come back. Remember that you don't need to feel confident to take confident action, and you might find that the simple act of asking helps you to feel more confident as your team members learn to trust in your intentions and feel more comfortable following your lead. And just one last thing I want to note here, there's no requirement to ask these questions. No leader needs to ask these questions. But I can guarantee that if you start asking these sorts of questions, which shows your team that you are interested in their development, you're interested in improvement, and you're not so focused on trying to be the boss all the time, you will go a long way in building trust in that team. A lot of leaders don't ask these sort of questions because they're more focused on the work itself, or they don't think they have the power to actually action anything that the team members come up with. But I'd encourage you to put those concerns aside and ask some of these questions of your team. They might be surprised at first if you haven't asked these sorts of things before, but you never know. It might actually open up a conversation which will really start to build trust and rapport with your team, which can be valuable when you're trying to get your team performing for the long run. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What other good questions can you think of asking in your team? Put them in the comments on the show notes page, thoughtleader.com/205. And of course, if you are interested in working on your confidence and helping your team improve, then you can apply for a complimentary coaching session with me by going to that show notes page, thoughtleader.com/205. I can't coach everyone, but if you don't apply, then we'll never know. Thank you for listening once again. I really appreciate you taking the time. If you have a minute, why not share this episode with someone you think who could benefit? That would be great to help me get the word out about the podcast. I appreciate it in advance. Now take care of yourselves, keep up the thoughtful leadership, and I'll be back next week.